The sky above every human colony turned white at the same moment. Every screen, every hologram, every display on every world that humanity called home flickered and changed. A face appeared. It was not a human face. It was long and narrow, glowing from within like a deep sea creature pulled from the darkest ocean. Its eyes were pale and ancient, and when it spoke, its voice carried the weight of 10,000 years. "Children of Earth," the creature said, "you have been warned before. You have been given time. You have been given mercy. That mercy ends now." The creature was High Arbiter Lyran, the supreme ruler of the Council of the Stars. The Council was a group of 12 alien species that had ruled this part of the galaxy for longer than human civilization had existed. They made the laws. They decided who could travel between stars, who could build weapons. Humanity had been under their shadow for 30 years, ever since their ships first arrived in Earth's sky, and told the people of the world that they were no longer alone and no longer free. Lyran continued speaking. His glowing body pulsed with cold light as he listed humanity's crimes. Unauthorized weapons research, secret military facilities hidden in the asteroid belts beyond Neptune, refusal to submit to council inspectors. Each accusation fell like a hammer. And then came the sentence: "You will surrender all research. You will dismantle your advanced fleet. You will deliver the scientists responsible for these violations. If you do not comply within 30 standard rotations, the Council will authorize a cleansing action against your species." A cleansing action. Every human who heard those words felt their blood go cold. They all knew what it meant. The Council had done it before to other species. Orbital bombardment, cities turned to glass. Entire civilizations burned back to the Stone Age or wiped out completely. It was not a threat. It was a promise. The transmission ended. The skies returned to normal, but nothing was normal anymore. On Luna Station, the military headquarters of the United Earth Navy, orbiting the moon, a room full of officers erupted into chaos. Some were shouting that they had to comply. Others were slamming their fists on tables and demanding war. The noise was deafening, and in the middle of it all, one man sat in perfect silence. Admiral Teho Kwan was 61 years old. His hair was gray at the temples, and his face was lined with years of service, but his eyes were steady and calm. He had fought border skirmishes with Council patrol ships. He had watched human colonies raided for breaking rules they never agreed to follow. And 12 years ago, he had buried his daughter, killed during a Council compliance raid on a civilian research station. She was 19 years old. She was studying medicine. She never held a weapon in her life. Teho let the officers argue for exactly 2 minutes. Then he stood up. "Enough," he said. His voice was not loud, but the room went silent immediately. He looked at each officer in the room, one by one. Then he turned to his right hand, Commander Do-hyun Shin, a broad-shouldered man with sharp eyes and a jaw that looked like it was carved from stone. "Open a secure channel to Station Omega," Teho said quietly. "Authorization black." Do-hyun's eyes widened slightly, but he did not hesitate. He entered the codes. A moment later, a new face appeared on the screen. It was Dr. Ji-ho Baek, a thin man with round glasses and dark circles under his eyes. He was standing in a laboratory that looked like it had been built inside a hollowed-out asteroid, which was exactly what it was. Behind him, through a reinforced window, something massive and dark floated in the void. It was so black that it seemed to eat the starlight around it. "Admiral," Ji-ho said. His voice was tight. "I saw the broadcast." "Is it ready?" Teho asked. Ji-ho paused. He looked over his shoulder at the dark shape behind him, then back at the screen. "Project Abyss is complete. All 12 ships are operational. The dark matter cores are stable. Weapons are armed." He swallowed hard. "They work, sir. God help us, they work. Tejo nodded slowly. Prepare the fleet for deployment. You have 12 hours. The channel closed. The room was silent. Every officer in Luna Station understood what had just happened. For years, rumors had spread through the military about a secret project, something hidden so deep that even senior commanders did not know the details. Now they knew. Humanity had built something the galaxy had never seen before. Do-hyun followed Tejo out of the command room and caught him in the corridor. The two men had served together for 20 years. They trusted each other with their lives. But Do-hyun had to ask. Tejo, he said, dropping rank for a moment, are you sure about this? The Council has destroyed civilizations older than us. Species that had thousands of years on us. They wiped them out and didn't even bother to remember their names. Tejo stopped walking. He looked out through a viewport at the blue curve of Earth below, glowing softly in the darkness. Millions of lights dotted the night side. Cities, homes, families, children who had never heard of the Council and didn't know that alien warships were coming to end their world. Then they have never faced a species angry enough, Tejo said quietly. He walked away without another word. 12 hours later, in the frozen darkness beyond Pluto, something stirred. Deep in the Kuiper Belt, where no Council sensor had ever reached, 12 shapes began to move. They were enormous, each one the size of a small moon, and they were darker than the space around them. They did not reflect light. They did not show up on any scanner. They were holes in the universe, and they were waking up. Captain Hannah Park stood on the bridge of the lead ship, the UEN Black Tide. She was 43 years old, with short black hair and a scar along her left jaw from a boarding action years ago. She looked at her crew. Lieutenant Suji Yoon at the tactical console, her fingers already dancing across the controls. Ensign Minji Ryu at communications, barely 25, the youngest person on the ship, trying very hard not to look terrified. Hana opened a channel to the fleet. All ships, this is Black Tide Actual. Light your engines. Set course for the Helios Corridor. It is time to show them what we are. 12 dark matter engines ignited in perfect unison, and 12 impossible warships began to move through the void, heading toward the largest armada the galaxy had ever assembled. Behind them, Earth waited. Ahead of them, 3,000 Council warships waited too. And none of them were ready for what was coming. The Helios Corridor was a river of empty space between two dying nebulae, and it was the only hyperspace lane that connected human territory to the rest of the galaxy. Whoever controlled the corridor controlled access to Earth. And right now, 3,000 warships of the Council's combined armada were parked across it like a wall of iron and fire. Warlord Kavos stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Fang of Drashan, and smiled with a mouth full of sharp teeth. He was 8 feet tall, covered in dark green scales, and his body was wrapped in battle armor, etched with the names of species he had personally helped destroy. There were a lot of names. Kavos had served the Council for over 200 years, and in all that time, no enemy had ever made him retreat. He did not plan to start today. How many ships do the humans have? He asked, his voice a low rumble, like grinding stone. Fleet Commander Pellick, a 6-limbed insectoid officer from the Keldon species, checked his displays. Approximately 200, Warlord. Light cruisers and destroyers. Nothing heavier than a Class 4 battleship. Kavos laughed. It was an ugly sound. 200 against 3,000. This will not even be a battle. It will be a cleaning. Pellick said nothing, but his antennae twitched with unease. He had studied the humans more carefully than Kavos had. Their ships were small, yes. Their fleet was young, yes. But their engineers were clever, and clever enemies were the most dangerous kind. Far across the void, the human fleet was approaching. 200 conventional warships in a tight formation, their engines burning blue against the black, and behind them, hidden in the dark, 12 much larger shapes drifted in perfect silence, cloaked in dark matter fields that bent light and gravity around them like invisible cloaks. No sensor in the galaxy could see them. Not yet. Aboard the Black Tide, Captain Hannah Park stood at the center of her bridge with her arms folded. The crew was quiet, focused. Every single one of them had volunteered for this mission, knowing that they might not come back. Hannah respected that more than she could say. "Lieutenant Yoon," she said, "status of the conventional fleet." Suji looked up from her tactical console. "All 200 ships in formation, Captain. Admiral Kwan confirms the Iron Dawn is in position. Phase 1 is ready on your order." "Ensign Ryu, what are you hearing from the enemy fleet?" Minji Ryu pressed her earpiece closer and listened. Her face changed. She looked up at Hana with wide eyes. "They are laughing, Captain. Their officers are placing bets on how quickly we will surrender. One of their commanders just wagered that we will not last 10 minutes. A cold silence fell across the bridge. Hana let it sit for a moment. Then the corner of her mouth lifted just slightly. "Let them laugh," she said. She opened a channel to the entire ship. She did not give a grand speech. That was not her way. She simply said, "You all know why we are here. You all know what is at stake. I trust every one of you. Do your jobs. That is all I ask." She closed the channel. Behind her, Dr. Jiho Beck stood near the back of the bridge, gripping a railing with white knuckles. He was not a soldier. He was a physicist, and he was terrified. Not of dying, but of what he had built. He had spent 15 years of his life working on Project Abyss, turning dark matter from a theory into a weapon. The ships did not just carry dark matter torpedoes. They were built around dark matter cores. Their hulls were laced with it. They could bend gravity, swallow light, and tear holes in space itself. Jiho had done the math 1,000 times. He knew it would work. But knowing and seeing were very different things. The battle began exactly as Admiral Tejo planned. The conventional fleet moved forward first. 200 human ships against 3,000 Council warships. It was not a fair fight. And it was not supposed to be. The human ships were bait. They fought bravely. Plasma fire lit up the corridor in streaks of blue and white. Human destroyers darted between the massive Council dreadnoughts, hitting them fast and pulling away. They scored hits, they drew blood, but the Council armada was overwhelming. One by one, human ships began to die. Explosions bloomed in the void like terrible flowers. Escape pods tumbled through the wreckage. On the Fang of Drashen, Kavos watched with satisfaction. They fight well for insects. But they die all the same. Increase pressure on their left flank. Collapse their formation. 63 human ships were destroyed in the first 20 minutes. Over 4,000 crew members lost. Admiral Tejo sat in the command chair of the Iron Dawn and felt every single death like a knife in his chest. But he waited. He had to wait. The Council fleet needed to push forward, to spread itself out, to commit fully. And they did. "Now," Tejo said quietly. He opened a channel to Captain Hana. One word. Black Tide. Hana's eyes hardened. She looked at Suji. "Drop the cloak." Suji pressed a single button, and the universe changed. 12 shapes appeared in the void behind the Council armada. They did not fly in from somewhere. They did not jump out of hyperspace. They simply appeared, as if reality itself had blinked and missed them. Each one was the size of a small moon, and they were darker than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Not black, like metal or stone, but black like the absence of everything. Light fell into them and did not come back. They were holes in the stars. Every sensor on every Council ship went blind at the same moment. Targeting systems failed. Navigation scrambled. communications filled with static and screaming. Pelik stared at his displays as every reading turned to nonsense. "Warlord," he said, his voice shaking. "I cannot identify the vessels. I cannot get any reading at all. Our weapons cannot lock onto them." Kavos leaned forward. For the first time in 200 years, something cold moved through his chest. He did not recognize it immediately, because he had never felt it before. It was fear. "All ships fire at will," he ordered. 3,000 ships opened fire on the 12 dark shapes. Plasma bolts, antimatter missiles, kinetic rounds, energy lances. Everything the Council had was thrown at the human warships. The barrage was blinding. It should have destroyed a planet. The dark matter hulls absorbed it all. Every shot, every blast, every beam was swallowed into the blackness and simply vanished. The 12 ships did not even slow down. Then the black tide fired. A beam of absolute darkness erupted from the ship's bow. It made no sound. It gave off no light. It was a lance of compressed dark matter, a focused gravitational distortion that moved at nearly the speed of light. It crossed the distance between the black tide and the nearest Council dreadnought in less than a second. The dreadnought did not explode. It did not shatter or burn. The space around it bent inward, twisted, folded like paper being crumpled by an invisible hand. The ship collapsed into itself, growing smaller and smaller, its metals screaming as gravity crushed it from every direction at once. And then it was gone. Not destroyed, not broken, simply erased from existence. Not wreckage, not dust, not atoms. Just empty space where a ship carrying 10,000 souls had been a moment before. The entire battlefield went silent. Minji pulled off her earpiece slowly. Tears were running down her face. "All Council communications have stopped, Captain," she whispered. "Every channel. Complete silence." One by one, the other 11 dark matter warships fired. 11 more beams of darkness. 11 more Council ships folded into nothing. Then they fired again, and again. Ships vanished by the dozens. Squadrons that had conquered entire star systems ceased to exist in the time it took to draw a breath. Jiho watched from the back of the bridge. His face was pale, his hands were shaking. He had built this. He had done the math, drawn the blueprints, solved the equations. But watching a ship with thousands of living beings inside it simply fold out of existence was something no equation could prepare him for. On the Fang of Drashin, Kavos stood frozen. Around him, his officers were screaming, begging for orders. 800 of his ships were gone. Not retreating, not damaged, gone, erased, as if they had never existed at all. For the first time in his 200-year career, Warlord Kavos gave an order he had never given before. "All ships," he said, and his voice cracked like old stone. "Full retreat." The battle lasted 11 minutes after the dark matter fleet revealed itself. When it was over, the Helios corridor was empty except for the wreckage of human ships and 12 dark shapes floating in silence. There were no Council wrecks because there was nothing left to wreck. The galaxy had just changed forever, and every living being with a radio knew it. The news of the Battle of Helios Corridor spread across the galaxy faster than light. Every species, every world, every space station heard the same impossible story. A young species, barely 2 centuries old in space, had broken the Council's armada in 11 minutes, using weapons that no one had ever seen before. 800 Council warships had not been destroyed. They had been erased, removed from existence, as if they were never built, never crewed, never launched. The galaxy did not know how to react. So for a while, it simply went quiet. On the ancient station called Aetherion, floating at the heart of the galaxy, near the core stars, the Council of the Stars gathered for an emergency session. Aetherion was older than most civilizations. Its halls were carved from a single asteroid of white crystal. and its chambers were large enough to hold thousands. For 10,000 years, the 12 elder species had met here to decide the fate of the galaxy. They had always done so from a position of absolute power. Today, for the first time, that power was in question. High Arbiter Lyran entered the great chamber slowly. He was 12 feet tall, and his body glowed with a soft blue light that had always pulsed strong and steady like a heartbeat. Today, the glow was dim. The other delegates noticed. They said nothing. The chamber was full. Representatives from all 12 elder species filled the curved rows of seats that rose high around the central platform. The air buzzed with whispered conversations in a dozen alien languages. Fear had a sound, and this room was full of it. Warlord Kavos was there, standing in his battle armor, but the arrogance was gone from his posture. He had lost 800 ships. He had given the first retreat order of his career. His reputation, built over 2 centuries of war, had been shattered in less time than it took to eat a meal. He stood with his arms crossed and his jaw tight, saying nothing. Ambassador Orath sat in the diplomatic section, his 6 limbs folded carefully. The Keldan diplomat had always been more thoughtful than his colleagues, and right now, his compound eyes were watching everyone. He had warned the Council years ago that pushing humanity too hard was a mistake. No one had listened. Now, they were listening. It was Delegate Teldra who spoke first. The Sorvine species were made of living crystal, and Teldra's body caught the light of the chamber and scattered it into rainbows as she moved to the center platform. The Sorvine were the record keepers of the galaxy. They did not fight. They did not trade. They watched, and they remembered. Teldra had access to 10,000 years of galactic history stored in the crystalline archives of her people. What she had found in those archives had kept her awake for 2 days. "I have searched our records," Teldra began, her voice like the sound of wind through glass. "In 10,000 years of Council history, no species has ever repelled a cleansing action. No species has ever destroyed a Council dreadnought with a single weapon strike. No species has ever developed weapons that our sensors cannot detect or our shields cannot stop." She paused. The chamber was absolutely silent. "But our records go further back than the Council. Much further. In the oldest archives, from before the 12 species united, there are legends. Stories passed down from civilizations that existed before ours. They speak of a species that lived millions of years ago, a species so advanced that they learned to control dark matter itself. They used it to build, to travel, to reshape the stars." Teldra's crystalline body flickered. "That species is gone. Not just dead, erased. Even their name has been lost. The old records say only this: they touched dark matter, and dark matter touched them back. And then there was nothing. The silence that followed was the heaviest silence Aetherion had ever known." Kavos broke it. He slammed his armored fist on the railing in front of him. "Then we must destroy the humans before they destroy themselves and take us with them. We gather every fleet from every species. We attack with everything we have. No more measured responses. Total war. Total war against an enemy who erased 800 of our ships without losing one of theirs?" Orath replied calmly. "Tell me, Warlord, how many ships would you like to lose next time? 2,000? All of them?" Kavos snarled at him, baring rows of sharp teeth. "Bow to a species that was living in mud while we were building empires. I would have us survive," Orath said simply. Lyran raised one long glowing hand, and both of them fell silent. The High Arbiter had not spoken since the session began. Everyone waited. But Lyran said nothing. Not yet. He simply looked at Teldra and nodded slowly, as if confirming something he had already suspected. Then he closed his eyes and was still. Far away, aboard the Black Tide, The mood was nothing like victory. Captain Hannah Park walked through the medical bay and forced herself to look at every face. The conventional fleet had paid the real price of the battle. 63 ships lost. Over 4,000 men and women dead. The survivors lay in medical beds with burns, broken bones, and the kind of empty stares that came from watching friends die in the vacuum of space. She had worn one herself, years ago. Lieutenant Suji Yoon was in the tactical center, running damage reports with mechanical efficiency. Her eyes were hollow. She had coordinated the battle in real time, watching ship markers disappear from her screen one by one. Each marker was a ship. Each ship was a crew. Each crew was made of people who had families waiting for them back home. Suji would not sleep well for a very long time. Ensign Min-ji-ru sat at her communications console with her headset around her neck. During the battle, she had intercepted council communications. She had heard their officers shouting orders. She had heard confusion turn to panic, turn to screaming. And in the final moments, she had heard something worse. Young voices. Conscripts barely older than her, crying for help in languages she could not understand but did not need to. Fear sounded the same in every language. Dr. Jiho Bak had locked himself in his quarters. He sat on the floor with his back against the wall and stared at his hands. These hands had drawn the blueprints. These hands had calibrated the dark matter cores. These hands had built a weapon that folded living beings out of existence. He kept seeing the first dreadnought collapse, the way space bent around it, the way it crumpled like paper. 10,000 crew on that ship, gone in less than a second. His weapon worked perfectly. That was the problem. He forced himself to stand and went to his console. He pulled up the sensor data from the battle and began analyzing it. The numbers told him something that turned his blood to ice. The dark matter lances had done more than destroy ships. They had torn tiny holes in space-time itself. Micro tears, invisible to the naked eye, but clearly visible in the data. Each tear had healed on its own, but they had taken longer to close than his models predicted. Much longer. Jiho ran the calculations 3 times, to be sure. Then he went to find the captain. He told Hana. Hana took him to Admiral Taeho on the Iron Dawn. Jiho laid out the data with shaking hands. If too many dark matter weapons were fired too close together, the micro tears could connect. They could cascade. Instead of tiny wounds in space that healed on their own, they could create a rupture, a wound that would grow instead of close. And a growing tear in space-time could swallow a planet, a star system, maybe more. Taeho listened to everything without interrupting. When Jiho was finished, the admiral was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Find the exact limit. Find out how much we can use safely. I need that number, Doctor." Jiho nodded and left. Taeho sat alone in his command chair for a while, looking at nothing. Then he opened a communication channel, but not to Earth and not to his fleet. He aimed it directly at Aetherion, at the Council of the Stars. "This is Admiral Taeho Kwan of the United Earth Navy," he said. "I am requesting a meeting with the full council, not as a subject, not as a criminal, as an equal. I believe we have things to discuss." On Aetherion, the message arrived like a thunderbolt. Kavos wanted to reject it immediately. Orath argued for acceptance. Teldra simply observed that in 10,000 years, no younger species had ever been invited to speak before the council as an equal, because none had ever earned it. Lyran opened his ancient eyes. His glow brightened, just slightly. "We will meet them," he said. And for the second time in a very short while, the galaxy held its breath. The neutral station Varanthos orbited a dying red star, in a system that belonged to no one. It was a ring of ancient metal and stone, built long ago by a species that no longer existed, and it had been used for exactly this kind of meeting for thousands of years. A place where enemies can sit across from each other without weapons pointed at their heads. At least, That was the idea. The council arrived first. 50 warships took position around Varanthos in a wide formation, their hulls gleaming with the polished metals and energy shields of civilizations that had been building warships since before humans learned to use fire. High Arbiter Lyran's personal cruiser docked at the station's northern port, followed by the diplomatic vessels of the senior delegates. Then the humans arrived. 5 ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. 3 were conventional UEN destroyers, sleek and gray, with blue engine trails. The other 2 were something else entirely. They were dark. Not painted dark, not colored dark, but dark in a way that made the eyes slide away from them, as if the brain refused to accept what it was seeing. The Black Tide and her sister ship, the Voidhammer, took position on either side of the station, like 2 shadows standing guard. Every council sensor that tried to scan them returned nothing. The ships were invisible to technology. You could only see them with your eyes, and even then, they looked more like holes in space than objects in it. The message was not subtle. Humanity had brought 5 ships because 5 was enough. Inside Varanthos, the great meeting hall was circular, with a high ceiling carved from dark stone. 2 long tables faced each other across an open floor. The council delegation sat on one side, High Arbiter Lyran at the center, his tall body glowing with dim blue light, his ancient eyes watching everything. Ambassador Orath to his left, 6 limbs folded, compound eyes unreadable. Warlord Kavos to his right, still wearing his battle armor, still carrying the names of conquered species on his chest. Delegate Teldra stood apart, her crystalline body catching the light, watching and recording as her kind always did. The human delegation entered from the opposite side. They wore formal United Earth Navy dress uniforms. Black fabric, silver trim, no medals, no decorations. Simple, clean, practical. They looked like exactly what they were, soldiers. Admiral Teho Kwan led the way. His back was straight, his pace steady, and his face showed nothing but calm. Behind him walked Captain Hannah Park, her scar catching the light, her eyes scanning the room the way a soldier's eyes always did, checking exits, counting threats. Dr. Jiho Bake walked beside her, looking deeply uncomfortable but refusing to show it. Commander Do-hyun Shin brought up the rear, his broad frame and hard eyes making it clear that he was there for more than conversation. The 2 groups faced each other across the open floor. 10,000 years of galactic order on one side, 200 years of human stubbornness on the other. The council ceremony began. It was ancient and complex, filled with ritual phrases in languages older than human writing. Lights dimmed and brightened. Delegates spoke formal words of greeting. The ceremony had been performed exactly the same way for millennia, and every species that had ever stood before the council had been expected to bow during the opening words. Teho did not bow. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back and watched the ceremony with respect, but his head never lowered. The council delegates noticed. Kavos gripped the edge of his table hard enough to crack it. When the ceremony ended, it was Teho's turn to speak. He stepped forward to the center of the floor, alone, a single human standing between 2 civilizations. He looked at Lyran, then at Kavos, then at Orath and Teldra. He took a slow breath, and then he told them the truth. He did not make threats. He did not boast about the battle. He did not wave his weapons like a trophy. Instead, he told them why. 30 years ago, your ships appeared in our sky, Teho began. His voice was steady and clear, the voice of a man who had rehearsed nothing, because every word came from lived experience. You told us we were not alone. Then you told us we were not free. You drew lines around our worlds and said we could not cross them. You sent inspectors to our laboratories and said we could not learn beyond what you allowed. You raided our colonies when we questioned your rules. You killed our people when we resisted. The chamber was completely silent. My daughter was 19 years old when your soldiers killed her during a compliance raid on a civilian research station. She was studying to be a doctor. She never held a weapon. She was one of thousands of human beings who died not in war, but in obedience. You called them acceptable losses. We called them our children. Kavos shifted in his seat. Oret's antennae lowered. Even Liren's glow seemed to dim. We did not build these weapons because we wanted power, Teho continued. We built them because you gave us no other choice. You put a blade to our throat and told us to be grateful for the privilege of breathing. Project Abyss was not born from ambition. It was born from the absolute refusal to let our species be erased. He let the words settle. Then his tone changed. It became quieter, more deliberate. But I did not come here to punish you. I came here to offer you something that no one in this room expected. He laid out his terms. Humanity would not use dark matter weapons aggressively. They would share the theoretical science, not the weapons, but the knowledge behind them, freely with the Council and all species. In exchange, humanity demanded 4 things. Full recognition as a sovereign civilization, a permanent seat on the Council, the immediate and permanent end of all cleansing actions against any species young or old, and the dissolution of the weapons restriction treaties that kept younger species in chains. The chamber erupted. Kavos stood up so fast his chair fell backward. You come into our hall, with the blood of our soldiers still fresh, and you dare to make demands? You dare to ask for a seat among your betters? Several other delegates joined him. Angry voices, in alien languages, filled the air. Threat displays lit up across the room. Bioluminescent flashes, expanded crests, bared teeth. But Orath spoke calmly through the noise. The human is not asking for anything unreasonable. He is asking for what every species deserves. The only reason we find it shocking is because we have spent 10,000 years pretending that freedom is something we have the right to give and take. Then Teldra stepped forward. The crystalline delegate rarely spoke in debates, but when she did, everyone listened. Her voice rang through the chamber like a bell. I have spent my life recording the history of this council. I have documented every species we have conquered, restricted, or destroyed. I have also documented our own progress, and what I have found is this. In the last 3,000 years, the technology of the elder species has not meaningfully advanced. We have stagnated. We build the same ships, the same weapons, the same stations that we built 3,000 years ago. And yet, humanity, a species we restricted and oppressed, leaped past all of us in a fraction of the time. She paused and looked directly at Liren. What does it say about us that the species we caged advanced further than the ones we freed? Nobody answered. Nobody could. Liren called a recess. The delegates filed out into separate chambers. During the break, Oreth found Hana standing alone near a viewport, looking at the dying red star outside. He approached her carefully. Keldon and humans had never been close, but Oreth had always been curious about these strange, stubborn creatures. Captain, he said, diplomat to soldier, I need to ask you something honestly. If the Council refuses your Admiral's terms, will humanity use those weapons again? Hana looked at him. Her brown eyes were steady and tired and honest. We would rather not, she said. But you would. He respected the answer because it was true. The session reconvened. Liren stood. All 12 feet of ancient, glowing authority rose from his seat, and the chamber fell silent so completely that Teho could hear his own heartbeat. The Council accepts, Liren said. Kavos made a sound like breaking rock. He stood, looked at Liren with something between rage and betrayal, and walked out of the chamber without a word. His footsteps echoed in the silence, until the doors closed behind him. The vote was taken. It was not unanimous, but it carried. Taeho stepped forward. Lyran stepped down from his platform. For a moment the two of them stood face to face, the ancient arbiter towering over the human admiral. Then Taeho extended his hand. Lyran looked at it, and something shifted in those pale ancient eyes. Something that might have been respect. He wrapped his long, glowing fingers around Taeho's hand. The handshake was broadcast to every world in the galaxy. Trillions watched. On Earth, people wept in the streets. On council worlds, some cheered and some cursed. On the worlds of younger species who had lived under the council's boot for centuries, something even more powerful happened. They began to hope. 6 months passed, and the galaxy was a different place. Not a peaceful place, not yet, but a different one. Humanity had its seat on the council. The old weapons restriction treaties were being torn apart, one by one, and younger species across the Orion Arm were standing up for the first time in their history, demanding sovereignty, demanding the right to grow on their own terms. Some council species welcomed the change, others did not. Warlord Kavos was one of those who did not. After walking out of the summit on Varanthos, Kavos had not returned to his homeworld or to council command. Instead, he had disappeared into the outer territories, the wild space beyond council borders, where law was whatever the strongest ship decided it was. And in those dark corners of the galaxy, he had been busy. He called it the Reclamation Pact. It was a rogue military alliance made up of loyalist factions from 3 elder species who refused to accept the new order. Officers who had been humiliated by the human victory. Warlords who believed that the old hierarchy was the natural way of things, and that humanity was a disease that needed to be burned out before it spread. Kavos gathered them quietly, armed them with stolen council weapons and black market technology, and built a fleet of over 1,000 warships in secret shipyards hidden in dead star systems. Ambassador Orath, who had become one of humanity's most important allies, discovered the plot through his intelligence networks. He sent the information to Admiral Taeho immediately. Kavos was not building a fleet to negotiate. He was building a fleet to strike Earth directly, to burn humanity's homeworld, and break their spirit in a single blow. Taeho received the intelligence aboard Luna Station, and felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders like a physical thing. He was tired. He had not truly rested since the Battle of Helios Corridor. Every night, when he closed his eyes, he saw council dreadnoughts folding in on themselves, crumpling like paper, disappearing with thousands of lives inside them. He had given that order. He had won the battle, and the cost of that victory lived behind his eyes every single night. He could end this the same way. He could send the dark matter fleet to find Kavos and erase his armada the way they had erased the first one. It would be fast, it would be efficient, and it would mean more ships folding into nothing, more lives blinking out of existence, more micro-tears in space-time that took too long to heal. Taeho thought about it. He thought about it for a long time. Then he made a different choice. He ordered the fleet to a defensive posture around Earth and reached out to Council loyalists for a joint response. He would not throw the first punch this time. He would not be the monster they wanted him to be. While Taeho prepared for war he hoped would not come, Jiho Beck was working on something that had consumed him since the battle. He had not slept well in months either. The data haunted him. The micro-tears, the way space-time bent and cracked under the force of his weapons. He had spent every waking hour searching for an answer to a question that would not leave him alone. Could dark matter be used to protect instead of destroy? The breakthrough came at 3 in the morning on a Tuesday, in a small laboratory aboard a research station orbiting Mars. Jiho stared at his calculations, checked them twice, then a third time, and then sat back in his chair and laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was the sound of a man who had been carrying a stone for 6 months and had finally set it down. He had found a way to use dark matter technology as a shield. A dark matter field generator could project a sphere of gravitational distortion around a planet or station, a barrier so dense and so complete that nothing could pass through it. Not plasma, not antimatter, not kinetic weapons, not radiation, nothing. The field could not be used offensively. It could not be shaped into a weapon. It could only protect. And it was, as far as Jiho could calculate, absolutely unbreakable. He presented his findings to Taeho the next day. The admiral listened, looked at the data, and for the first time in 6 months, something in his face relaxed. Not a smile, but something close to it. "Build it," Taeho said. "Build it fast." Jiho built it fast. The Reclamation Pact struck 4 weeks later. Over 1,000 warships dropped out of hyperspace near Earth in a formation designed for total bombardment. Kavos stood on the bridge of his new flagship, a massive dreadnought he had named the Claw of Justice, and looked at the blue planet on his view screen with cold satisfaction. Today, he would burn humanity's cradle. Today, the old order would be restored. The conventional human and council loyalist fleets scrambled to defensive positions. The dark matter warships powered up, their black hulls swallowing the light of Earth's sun. The galaxy watched through 1,000,000 sensors and broadcasts, holding its breath, expecting a second apocalypse. Captain Hana Park stood on the bridge of the Black Tide and looked at her crew. Suji was at tactical, her hands steady, her jaw set. Minji was at communications, older now, harder but still kind underneath it all. Jiho was at a specially installed console near the back of the bridge, his hands hovering over controls that had never been tested in combat. "Doctor," Hana said, "it is your show." Jiho closed his eyes for 1 second. He thought about the dreadnought he had watched fold into nothing. He thought about the 10,000 lives that disappeared in a blink. He thought about his hands, the hands that built the weapon. Today, those same hands would build something different. He opened his eyes and pressed the activation sequence. A sphere of absolute darkness bloomed around Earth. It expanded outward from the Black Tide's position, growing in seconds until it encompassed the entire planet, the Moon, Luna Station, and every orbital facility in Earth's space. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. A perfect sphere of gravitational distortion, darker than the void between stars, and yet somehow alive, with a faint shimmer at its edges, like the surface of a black ocean catching distant light. Kavos saw it form and felt his blood go cold. "All ships," he ordered, his voice rough with fury. "Open fire. Everything. Now." 1,000 warships fired at once. Plasma bolts, antimatter warheads, kinetic rounds the size of buildings, energy beams that could cut through a mountain. It was the combined firepower of 3 elder species, enough to crack a continent. Every single shot hit the dark matter shield, and every single shot disappeared. The plasma was absorbed, the antimatter was swallowed, the kinetic rounds struck the surface of the sphere and simply stopped existing. The energy beams bent around the shield like water flowing around a stone, and dissipated into nothing. Not one particle of energy reached the surface of the Earth. Kavos ordered a second barrage, then a third, then a fourth. Each time, the shield absorbed everything without so much as a flicker. His officers began looking at each other with wide eyes. Pelik, standing at the tactical station, quietly removed his hand from the weapons console and stepped back. Taeho opened a communication channel. His face appeared on every screen in Kavos's fleet. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had seen too much, but his voice was steady. "You cannot break us," Tejo said. "You cannot burn us, and we will not erase you the way we could." He paused, and for a moment, the weight of everything he had done and everything he had chosen not to do was visible on his face. "Stand down, Kavos. This is over." Kavos stared at the view screen. Behind the dark matter shield, Earth hung in space, untouched, untouchable. Around him his fleet was intact, alive, unharmed. The humans could have destroyed them. They had the weapons to erase every single ship in his armada. He had seen what those weapons could do, and instead they had chosen a shield. The silence on his bridge stretched for a long time. Then Pellic stepped forward, followed by 3 other senior officers. They removed Kavos's command codes from the system, calmly and professionally, and opened a channel to the human fleet. "This is Fleet Commander Pellic of the Keldan species," he said. "The Reclamation Pact stands down. Warlord Kavos is relieved of command." Kavos did not resist. He stood in the center of his bridge and stared at the dark shield around Earth. And somewhere in his ancient reptilian mind, he finally understood something that the Council had failed to grasp. Humanity was not dangerous because of what they could destroy. They were dangerous because of what they could survive, what they could endure, and what they could choose not to do, even when they had every right to do it. In the months that followed, the galaxy settled into its new shape. Admiral Tejo Kwan retired from the United Earth Navy. On his last day, he took a shuttle to the moon, where a memorial wall had been built, bearing the names of every human who died in the conflict. He walked along the wall slowly, reading names, until he found a small empty space near the end. He placed a photograph there. A young woman, 19 years old, with her father's eyes and a smile that could light up a room. He stood there for a long time, alone with the stars and the silence, and the memory of a girl who should have been a doctor. Captain Hannah Park was promoted to admiral. She took command of the Black Tide as the flagship of a new Joint Human Council peacekeeping fleet. Suji became her executive officer, sharp and steady as always. Minji transferred to the diplomatic corps, where her gift for languages and her ability to listen, truly listen, made her one of humanity's finest ambassadors. Dr. Jiho Beck accepted a research position at a new galactic institute on Etherion, working alongside Delegate Teldra. Together, the physicist and the crystal archivist began studying dark matter not as a weapon, but as a tool for building bridges between stars, shields around worlds, structures that could last 1,000,000 years. Ambassador Oroth proposed a new charter for the Council of the Stars. No more elder and younger species, no more hierarchies based on age or power, just species. Equal. The motion passed. It was not unanimous. It never would be. But it passed. Teldra began writing a new chapter in the Galactic Archive. For 10,000 years, every chapter had been titled with the name of a conquest, a war, or a fallen civilization. This chapter was different. For the first time in recorded galactic history, the title was a single word: peace. And out in the void, the Black Tide drifted silently past Earth on patrol. Its hull was darker than the night between galaxies, and no light reflected from its surface. But inside, its corridors were warm and bright. Human voices filled the air, laughter, arguments, someone singing off-key in the mess hall, the sounds of a species that had been told it was too young, too small, too weak to matter, and had answered with the most human response imaginable. They had refused to believe it.